What if I told you that something sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now has been promoted online as a tool that can create a shocking-sized change in seniors? It sounds dramatic, almost too dramatic, and whenever you hear claims like that, especially about aging, it's worth pausing and asking a deeper question. What's really going on inside the body? Because aging is not random. Muscle loss is not random. Belly fat is not random. Loss of vitality is not random. They are driven by predictable biological shifts in insulin, in cortisol, in kidney function, in muscle protein balance, and in something most people never think about: acid-base regulation. Now, sodium bicarbonate, commonly known as baking soda, is a buffering agent. It neutralizes acid. In medical settings, it's sometimes used to correct metabolic acidosis. In athletic performance research, it has been studied for its ability to buffer lactic acid during high-intensity exercise. But here's the key distinction. Correcting a medical acid imbalance is not the same thing as reversing aging. Buffering lactic acid is not the same thing as shrinking belly fat. And swallowing baking soda is not the same thing as fixing metabolism. Here's what's really going on inside your body as you age. Your kidneys become slightly less efficient at regulating acid load. Muscle mass declines, which reduces glucose disposal capacity. Insulin resistance increases. Chronic low-grade inflammation rises. These shifts can subtly increase what we call net acid load, not enough to change your blood pH dramatically, because your body tightly regulates that, but enough to influence muscle retention, bone density, and metabolic flexibility. And that's where the conversation becomes interesting, because bicarbonate itself may not be the magic, but the acid-base balance of your body and what influences it absolutely matters for aging strength, fat distribution, and metabolic resilience. In today's discussion, we're not chasing hype. We're going to break this down like scientists at a whiteboard. You'll understand what bicarbonate actually does physiologically, why seniors may experience subtle metabolic acidosis, how acid load connects to muscle size and fat storage, where the research supports intervention and where it doesn't, and most importantly, what practical, safe strategies can truly shift body composition after 60, because the goal isn't shortcuts. The goal is sustainable metabolic repair. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your blood pH is tightly regulated between 7.35 and 7.45. That range is so narrow that even small deviations can become dangerous. So when someone says you need to alkalize your body, it reveals a misunderstanding. Your body already does that, constantly. Your lungs regulate carbon dioxide, your kidneys regulate bicarbonate, your cells buffer acids internally. Think of it like a thermostat system in a laboratory. The temperature barely moves, but behind the scenes, multiple systems are constantly adjusting to keep it stable. Now here's the subtle but important shift that happens with aging. As we get older, kidney function gradually declines, even in healthy individuals, not dramatically, but measurably. Glomerular filtration rate decreases about 1% per year after age 40 in many adults. That means the kidneys become slightly less efficient at excreting acid produced from high-protein diets, processed foods, grain-heavy diets, chronic stress hormones, sedentary muscle metabolism. The blood pH stays normal, but the work required to keep it normal increases, and that's where low-grade metabolic acidosis enters the conversation. We're not talking about a medical emergency. We're talking about subtle acid retention at the tissue level. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body as a construction site. Your muscles are scaffolding. Your bones are structural beams. Your liver is the processing plant. Your kidneys are the waste management team. If waste disposal slows down slightly, even just a little, the body compensates. And one of the compensation strategies involves buffering acid with alkaline reserves from muscle and bone. Over time, that may contribute to increased muscle breakdown, reduced muscle protein synthesis, higher cortisol signaling, reduced anabolic signaling, potential shifts in body composition. Now this is where people jump to. So just take baking soda. But physiology is more nuanced than that. What the research shows is that chronic low-grade metabolic acidosis in older adults has been associated with increased muscle wasting and decreased bone density. Some studies suggest that neutralizing dietary acid load may improve nitrogen balance and muscle preservation. However, and this is important, large randomized controlled trials in older adults with chronic kidney disease did not show dramatic improvements in physical function with bicarbonate supplementation alone. Translation: correcting acid load may support the environment for muscle maintenance, but it does not override insulin resistance. It does not override inactivity. It does not override poor protein intake. Acid buffering is supportive, not transformative on its own. Now here's where this becomes practical. If you are over 60 and concerned about size change, the question is not, should I take bicarbonate? The question is my body in a muscle-building or muscle-breaking state? Because muscle size changes are governed primarily by insulin sensitivity, adequate protein intake, resistance training stimulus, cortisol balance, mitochondrial efficiency. Acid load is a background variable, so before we even discuss bicarbonate protocols, we must establish metabolic context. And if this is helpful so far, if you appreciate science over hype, consider subscribing. I break down complex physiology like this every day so you can make informed decisions without falling for trends. Now, let's go one layer deeper, into the real driver of size change in seniors. Because when people say they want a shocking size change, they usually mean one of two things. They want less belly fat, or they want more muscle fullness and strength. And those two outcomes are governed by completely different hormonal signals. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, three major shifts occur. Insulin sensitivity declines. Cortisol becomes more disruptive. Muscle protein synthesis becomes less responsive, something called anabolic resistance. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of insulin as a key. Muscle cells are doors. Glucose is fuel trying to enter. When you're 30, the key works smoothly. The door opens. Fuel goes into muscle. When you're 65 and insulin resistant, the lock is rusty. The key doesn't work as well, so glucose lingers in the bloodstream longer. And when glucose lingers, insulin stays elevated. And when insulin stays elevated chronically, two things happen. Fat storage increases, especially around the abdomen. Fat burning decreases. Now where does bicarbonate fit into this? Indirectly, through cortisol and acid buffering. Chronic low-grade metabolic acidosis can increase cortisol secretion. Cortisol, while essential for survival, is catabolic to muscle when elevated chronically. Cortisol's job is to break tissue down to maintain stability. It increases gluconeogenesis. It raises blood sugar. It can promote central fat storage. So when acid load rises subtly over years, cortisol signaling may increase slightly as a compensatory mechanism. But here's the crucial distinction. Acid load is not the primary driver of muscle loss. Insulin resistance and inactivity are. That's why simply neutralizing acid with baking soda does not suddenly create muscle growth or shrink fat. Muscle growth requires mechanical tension. Let me repeat that. Muscle growth requires mechanical tension. Without resistance training, even light, consistent resistance, muscle protein synthesis remains low regardless of acid buffering. What the research consistently shows is that older adults require 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily. Adequate leucine intake per meal, around 2.5 grams. Resistance stimulus at least 2 to 3 times per week. Sufficient recovery sleep. Now here's the subtle connection. If someone improves their dietary acid load, meaning they eat more potassium-rich vegetables and fruits, reduce processed grains, and support kidney function, muscle protein balance may improve slightly. But if they don't address insulin and movement, nothing dramatic happens. So the shocking size change people attribute to bicarbonate often comes from reduced water retention, improved digestion, temporary shifts in sodium balance, or placebo-driven adherence to healthier habits. Not true fat melting, not instant muscle gain. This is why root cause thinking matters. If this explanation is helping you think differently about aging and metabolism, consider subscribing. I focus on real physiology, not shortcuts, because your body deserves precision. Now let's examine what the research actually shows. Not the headlines, not the social media clips, but the controlled human data. Because this is where clarity replaces hype. Sodium bicarbonate has been studied for decades. Most of the strong data comes from sports performance research in younger athletes, where bicarbonate can buffer lactic acid during short, high-intensity exercise. But seniors are not typically performing repeated 400-meter sprints. So what about older adults? In populations with chronic kidney disease, bicarbonate is sometimes prescribed to correct metabolic acidosis. In those cases, correcting acidosis can slow muscle wasting and support better nitrogen balance. But in otherwise healthy older adults, the evidence is more nuanced. Some small studies suggest that reducing dietary acid load, whether through bicarbonate supplementation or increased fruit and vegetable intake, may reduce muscle protein breakdown markers. However, larger randomized trials have shown that bicarbonate supplementation alone does not dramatically improve muscle strength, walking performance, or overall functional outcomes in seniors. Let me translate that into plain English. Neutralizing acid may help create a slightly more favorable environment for muscle preservation, but it does not override inactivity, poor protein intake, chronic high insulin, sleep deprivation, elevated stress hormones. Think of bicarbonate as adjusting the humidity in a greenhouse. If the soil is poor, the sunlight is insufficient, and you never water the plant, adjusting humidity will not make the plant grow. Now, there is another important physiological issue we must address: sodium load. Bicarbonate contains sodium, and many seniors already struggle with blood pressure regulation. Excess sodium can increase fluid retention, blood pressure, cardiovascular strain. So indiscriminate supplementation is not harmless. What the research supports more consistently is this: reducing dietary acid load through food, particularly potassium-rich vegetables and fruits, improves metabolic markers more reliably than baking soda supplementation alone. Foods that naturally reduce acid load include spinach, zucchini, avocado, leafy greens, berries, citrus fruits. These foods provide potassium salts of organic acids, which metabolize into bicarbonate internally, without the sodium burden. That's a critical distinction. The body prefers food-based buffering systems, so here is the intelligent takeaway. If someone experiences a visible size change after starting bicarbonate, it is likely due to improved hydration, sodium-related fluid shifts, digestive changes, or simultaneous dietary improvements, not a magical fat-burning effect. Now let's design this correctly. Because if the real goal is meaningful size change after 60, less visceral fat, more muscle density, better metabolic tone, then we need a protocol that works with physiology, not against it. Let's go back to the whiteboard. There are 3 levers that truly change body composition in seniors: insulin control, mechanical muscle stimulation. Protein signaling acid-base balance is supportive, but these 3 are foundational. So here's a practical, science-aligned framework. First, control insulin rhythm. Insulin is not the enemy. Chronically elevated insulin is. When insulin stays elevated all day, through frequent snacking, refined carbohydrates, or insulin resistance, fat burning is suppressed. What the research consistently shows is that improving insulin sensitivity leads to reductions in visceral fat, even without extreme calorie restriction. Practical application: eat 2 to 3 structured meals per day. Avoid constant grazing. Prioritize protein and fibrous vegetables first at each meal. Consider a 12-14-hour overnight fasting window. This restores metabolic flexibility. Second, stimulate muscle directly. Let me be clear, no supplement replaces resistance training. After age 60, muscle protein synthesis becomes less responsive to small signals. It requires a stronger stimulus. That does not mean heavy powerlifting. It means resistance bands, bodyweight squats, light dumbbells, controlled, slow movements, at least 2 10 to 3 sessions per week. Mechanical tension activates mTOR signaling, the pathway responsible for muscle growth. Without that signal, even perfect nutrition will not create size change. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I focus on these root levers because they are what actually move the needle. Third, optimize protein quality and timing. Older adults require more protein per meal to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Target 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein per meal. Include leucine-rich sources, eggs, fish, dairy, or whey. Distribute protein evenly across meals instead of eating most at dinner. Now, where does bicarbonate fit responsibly? Here is the cautious, evidence-based perspective. If someone has been advised by a physician that they have low-grade metabolic acidosis or reduced kidney buffering capacity, medically supervised bicarbonate therapy may be appropriate. But for otherwise healthy seniors, a safer and more physiologically elegant strategy is increase potassium-rich plant intake. This lowers dietary acid load naturally and supports blood pressure regulation. Think of it as upgrading the body's internal buffering system without forcing it. Now let's address something important: cortisol. Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Elevated cortisol promotes abdominal fat storage and muscle breakdown. Sleep deprivation increases cortisol. Poor blood sugar control increases cortisol. So any protocol that ignores sleep and stress will fail long term. Aim for 7-8 hours of sleep, morning sunlight exposure, light evening movement, reduced late-night screen stimulation. This stabilizes hormonal rhythm. Now let's integrate everything into one clear, sustainable structure, something you can actually apply starting this week. Because information without structure becomes noise, and physiology rewards consistency. Let's build a simple weekly framework for meaningful size change after 60. First, think in terms of metabolic rhythm, not restriction. Your body thrives on signals, feeding signals, fasting signals, movement signals, recovery signals. When these are chaotic, fat accumulates and muscle declines. When they are structured, adaptation improves. Here is a practical blueprint. Daily structure. Morning. Wake at a consistent time. Get 5 to 10 minutes of natural light exposure within the first hour. Hydrate with water, not sugar. If metabolically stable, delay breakfast slightly to allow natural cortisol rhythm to decline before eating. Midday. First meal anchored in protein, 30-40 grams. Include fibrous vegetables. Moderate healthy fats. Avoid leading with refined carbohydrates. This keeps insulin response controlled. Afternoon. Resistance training 2 to 3 days per week. On non-training days, light walking after meals improves glucose disposal. Even 10 minutes of post-meal walking significantly reduces glucose spikes, which directly reduces insulin exposure. Evening. Second or third protein-focused meal. Avoid large, late-night carbohydrate loads. Stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. This supports overnight fat oxidation. Now let's layer in dietary acid balance intelligently. Instead of adding baking soda, aim for 6 to 8 cups of vegetables daily, leafy greens at least once per day, potassium-rich foods like avocado and zucchini, adequate hydration. This reduces dietary acid load naturally and supports kidney buffering. If someone insists on experimenting with bicarbonate, it should only be in small amounts, under medical guidance, avoided in individuals with hypertension or heart disease, because sodium load matters. Now let's return to the phrase, shocking size change. True body composition change after 60 is not shocking. It is steady, predictable, biological. Here's what actually changes size. Visceral fat shrinks when insulin exposure decreases. Muscle thickness increases when mechanical tension and protein are sufficient. Bloating decreases when digestion improves. These are the mechanisms, not magic powder. And here's the empowering part. You control most of these levers daily. If this evidence-based approach resonates with you, if you value long-term strength over shortcuts, consider subscribing. I share science-driven strategies like this regularly so you can age with intention, not confusion. Let's bring this together clearly and calmly. Because the goal was never baking soda. The goal was understanding what truly drives size change in the aging body. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your blood pH is tightly regulated. It does not swing wildly based on what you eat. Your kidneys and lungs work constantly to maintain that balance. As you age, kidney buffering efficiency may decline slightly. Dietary acid load may rise. Low-grade metabolic acidosis can subtly influence muscle protein balance and cortisol signaling. But that is a background variable, not the primary driver. The true regulators of body size after 60 are insulin exposure, muscle stimulation, protein adequacy, cortisol rhythm, sleep quality. Bicarbonate can buffer acid. It cannot override insulin resistance. It cannot replace resistance training. It cannot compensate for chronic stress. And any short-term size change many people notice is often fluid shift, reduced bloating, or improved digestion, not rapid fat loss or instant muscle growth. What the research consistently supports is this. If you reduce chronic insulin elevation, visceral fat decreases. If you apply mechanical tension to muscle consistently, muscle thickness increases. If you provide adequate protein spaced across the day, anabolic signaling improves. If you sleep deeply and regulate stress, cortisol stabilizes and abdominal fat storage decreases. Those are controllable variables. So here is your practical challenge. For the next 14 days, structure your meals, no grazing. Eat at least 30 grams of protein per meal. Walk 10 minutes after each meal. Perform resistance training 3 times per week. Add 2 extra servings of leafy greens daily. No powders, no dramatic hacks. Track how your waist measurement changes. Track how your strength improves. Track your morning energy. Observe your own biology. Because longevity is not built on trends, it is built on repeated intelligent inputs. If bicarbonate ever has a role, it is supportive and situational, ideally guided by medical evaluation. But your metabolic health does not depend on it. It depends on rhythm, on muscle stimulus, on insulin control, on recovery. Aging is not a collapse. It is an adaptation process. An adaptation responds to signals. Send your body the right signals consistently, and size change becomes predictable, not shocking. If this added clarity and value, like the video and subscribe. Join others who are choosing to optimize their health through science, not shortcuts. And today, don't change everything. Just change one lever. Then watch how your body responds.